The fog rolled in early that afternoon like a thick, silent blanket smothering the city. In the gleaming park residence, 10-year-old Theo knelt on the cold kitchen tiles, his tiny hands gripping his baby brother Milo's stroller as milk pooled around them like a pool of broken trust. His stepmother Celeste towered over him, her icy gaze fixed, ready to strike. "You think you can take what's mine," she hissed, holding a pitcher of expensive formula above her head. But just as her hand began to move, the sound of a voice, calm yet unwavering, cut through the tension. "Stop." The man who said those words was Marcus Park, Theo's father, the one person whose presence could change everything. But would it? Before we dive into the story, leave a comment below and let me know which city you are watching from. Let's get started. The fog had come in early that afternoon, rolling up from the bay like a slow tide of smoke pressing itself against the glass walls of the park residence in Pacific Heights. From the street, the house looked like a fortress, 3 stories of glass and steel perched high above the city, every angle polished, every window flawless. But inside, the gleam was fractured. Theo Park, 10 years old, knelt on the cold kitchen tile, his knees damp from the puddle spreading across the marble floor. Milk, thin, watered down, already souring, dripped from the lip of a glass pitcher and ran in small streams toward the stainless steel fridge. His hands were tight around the shoulders of his baby brother Milo, who lay in a stroller beside him. The infant's cheeks were blotched crimson, his tiny fists jerking as a hoarse cry rattled from his throat. "Stop!" Theo's voice cracked. Just one word, but it ripped through the sterile quiet of the house, sharp as a splinter. Across from him stood Celeste Vance, the woman everyone else called his stepmother, though Theo had never once let that word settle comfortably in his mouth. She was tall, immaculate, as always dressed in ivory cashmere, her hair twisted into a knot that shimmered under the kitchen's recessed lights. But her expression was not the soft mask she wore at charity luncheons or the country club. Her face burned with fury, eyes flashing like glass shards, lips pulled thin. "You think you can take what's mine?" Her voice dripped sugar over venom. She held the pitcher high, a bead of milk trembling at its edge. "You little thief, this formula is imported. It isn't for games." Theo clutched Milo tighter, feeling the baby's damp hair against his chin. He was hungry. The words came out fast, almost swallowed by Milo's choking sobs. "You were gone all morning." He wouldn't stop crying. For a moment, the only sound was the steady hum of the fridge, the broken gasps of an infant too tired to cry properly, and Theo's own heartbeat slamming in his chest. Then footsteps measured expensive sounded from the hallway. Marcus Park, 42, biotech entrepreneur, master of boardrooms and glossy magazine profiles, stepped into the kitchen doorway. Still in his gray Xenia suit phone in one hand, he froze at the tableau before him. His gaze snapped first to the puddle, then to Theo's yellowing sneakers, then up to Celeste, who let the pitcher clink against the counter, her composure snapping back into place as if by habit. "What the hell is happening here?" Marcus's voice was low-edged with something Theo had rarely heard from his father, urgency. Celeste moved first. She set the pitcher down, turned, and reached to brush invisible dust from her sleeve. "Marcus," she said, smoothly voice, shifting to that velvet register she reserved for him. "I found Theo wasting the skincare milk I buy. He was feeding it to the baby. It's dangerous. I had to stop him." Theo opened his mouth, but the words stuck caught in his throat like a swallowed stone. He wanted to shout to tell his father that Celeste had locked the formula in the upstairs bathroom, that she rationed it like gold dust, that Milo's cries were stretching longer every night. But Marcus's eyes, tired, distant, ringed with a grief that had never fully left since his wife had died, were already softening under Celeste's hand on his arm. "I didn't." Theo tried. His voice cracked again, too thin against the polished air. Marcus looked at him, finally frown tightening. "Theo, you know better than to take things without permission." He crossed the room, knelt just enough to press a towel into his son's hands. "Clean yourself up. Next time ask me if Milo needs something." Theo bit down on the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood. His father's cologne clean chemical expensive, mixed with the sour smell of spilled milk. He wiped at his brother's damp face, whispering under his breath so low Marcus could not hear. "We just have to endure." Marcus stood again, his hand lingering a fraction too long on Celeste's arm, then left the kitchen. The sound of his shoes tapping across the hardwood faded down the hall up the wide staircase into silence. Celeste turned back, her smile vanishing like a curtain dropping. She bent low close enough that Theo could see the diamond glint at her throat. "You want him to think you're innocent?" she hissed, voice a whip. "Try it. He'll never believe you. And if you ever steal again, the baby won't get a single drop." "Do you understand?" Theo's chest rose and fell too fast. He nodded once, barely. Celeste straightened, smoothed her dress, and left heels ticking sharp against tile. The kitchen door swung shut, leaving Theo and Milo in a puddle of cold milk. Later that evening, when the fog had thickened into a wool blanket over the city, Marcus sat in his glass-walled study on the third floor. He opened his laptop, fingers hesitating before typing the password. A folder glowed on the screen. Yoonji, Theo's mother. He had not clicked it in months. But something, maybe the flash of milk across his daughter's, no, his son's face, maybe the tremor in Theo's single word, stop, pushed him forward. He opened a file. On-screen Yoonji Park looked back at him, hair long and black eyes soft despite the fatigue of late pregnancy. Her voice, recorded on a hospital phone, rose gentle but firm. "Marcus, if anything happens, watch Theo. He sees more than he says. Don't let Milo suffer because you're too busy. And don't let the light in Theo's eyes go out. He'll show you everything if you only look." Marcus pressed a hand to his forehead. For a long moment, the city outside seemed to stop breathing. Downstairs, muffled through the walls, came the faint sound of a baby crying. At school the next day, Theo moved through the cafeteria like a shadow. His stomach knotted, but not for himself. On a nearby table, a half-eaten sandwich lay abandoned. He glanced around, quick as a hunted thing, then slid the sandwich into his backpack. "Hey." Theo flinched. His teacher, Ms. Han, stood behind him, her lined face calm, her voice quiet. She didn't scold. Instead, she reached into her tote bag and pulled out a carton of milk, setting it gently on the table. "Take this," she said. "And if you need more, you ask me." "Understood." Theo looked up. Her eyes were steady, not pitying, not sharp, just present. He nodded. The carton was cold in his hands, heavier than it should have been. He thought of Milo's fists unclenching when the bottle touched his lips, the small sound he made when hunger gave way to relief. That night, when Marcus returned from the lab, he passed Patricia Gomez, the elderly neighbor. She carried a bag of bread rolls flour still on her apron. "Your boy came to me again," she said, voice blunt. "Too thin. Don't let that woman starve your children, Mr. Park." Marcus froze. He muttered something about mistakes, children exaggerating, but Patricia only shook her head. "I've been a mother. I know what hunger looks like." She turned away, leaving him with her words heavy in the hall. Inside the fridge, when Marcus opened it later, the bottles of skincare milk were untouched, pristine. But the shelf for formula empty. He closed the door. The sound was soft, but it scraped like glass in his chest. Near midnight, Theo sat huddled on the back steps of the house, Milo in the stroller beside him. The city fog licked cold against his skin. From a plastic bag, he pulled a crust of bread, tore it in half, and pressed one piece into his brother's tiny hands. "Don't cry," he whispered. "I've got you." Milo whimpered, then latched onto the bread, his little jaw working clumsily. Theo bent low, his arm tight around the stroller handle, shielding him from the wind. Behind them, the kitchen door opened with a creak. Marcus stood in the threshold, face shadowed by the dim light. He saw them, the boy, the baby, the bread. He froze. Theo's head jerked up, eyes wide, bread still clutched in his hand. "Dad. Please. He's so hungry." Marcus's throat went dry. The image, two children surviving on scraps outside a mansion of glass, burned into him. Yoonji's voice echoed in his head. Don't let the light in Theo's eyes go out. For the first time in months, Marcus could not look away. The next morning, fog still pressed heavy over San Francisco, clinging to the glass towers downtown, wrapping Pacific Heights in a damp gray shawl. From the outside, the park house looked untouched, sleek, immaculate, expensive. Inside, though, silence hung like smoke after a fire. Theo woke before dawn, lying on top of the covers in his small room, fully dressed. He hadn't bothered to change into pajamas. Across the hall, Milo's cries had flickered through the night like a faulty alarm, thin, desperate, quickly muffled. Theo's stomach twisted at every sound, but his body had learned to stay quiet, to wait. When he finally pushed open the door, Milo was curled on his side in the crib, cheeks hollow, hair damp with sweat. An empty bottle sat on the dresser, formula so watered down it looked more like cloudy tap water. Theo lifted it, shook it, heard the faintest splash, and clenched his jaw. Celeste's voice floated from the kitchen downstairs, smooth and lilting as she spoke into her phone. "Yes, darling, the spa at 2. Of course I'll bring the deposit. He trusts me with the card. It's practically my account anyway." A pause, laughter, and then her heels tapped across marble. Theo crouched beside Milo, whispering, "Hang on, buddy. Just hang on." He pulled open his desk drawer, revealing a toy whale made of cheap blue plastic. The seams were cracked from years of baths, but inside, carefully taped into the hollow body, was a button-sized camera. Theo had ordered it weeks ago, with a prepaid card he found hidden in the back of Marcus's office. He didn't know why he had done it, only that the house itself seemed to erase things, unless he captured them. A bruise would fade, a bottle could be rinsed, a scream drowned out by the dishwasher. But video couldn't be argued away. He set the whale on the shelf, facing the crib, angled so it could catch both Milo's feedings and Celeste's visits. By the time he came downstairs, Celeste was gone. The house smelled faintly of perfume and spoiled milk. The fridge gleamed with rows of untouched skincare bottles, each labeled in elegant script. But the lower shelf where baby food should have been was bare except for a half-empty water jug. Theo reached instinctively for the cupboard, found it locked with a child-proof latch too high for him to reach, and stepped back, fists curling. That afternoon at school, his hunger was louder than the teacher's voice. During recess, Ms. Han noticed him hovering by the cafeteria bin, eyes fixed on discarded cartons. She walked over, speaking softly. "You can't live on scraps, Theo." She opened her bag and pulled out 2 items, a sealed carton of milk and a wrapped granola bar. She pressed them into his hand without ceremony. "Take these, for you and Milo." Theo hesitated, throat tight, then whispered, "Thank you." "Listen," Ms. Han added, lowering her voice. "If you need more, if things at home aren't right, you can come to me. You understand?" Theo nodded but didn't lift his eyes. He couldn't risk it. Celeste had already warned him, "If you tell anyone, the baby goes without." That evening when Marcus came home, Patricia Gomez intercepted him in the lobby, her flour-dusted apron still tied at her waist. "She asked me for bread again," the old woman said. "Your boy, he looks thin as a rail. And the baby, he cries like he hasn't eaten in days. Marcus stiffened. Patricia, I'm not mistaken, she cut in. I've raised children and grandchildren. Hunger has a sound. You can't hide it. She pressed a warm roll into his hand, her eyes steady. Do something. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. Upstairs, when he checked the fridge again, he saw the same thing, skincare bottles, untouched food shelf, barren. He lingered on the threshold of the kitchen, his mind pulling in two directions, one voice insisting Patricia exaggerated another, whispering Yunji's words. Theo sees more than he says. Later, Marcus sat in his office, staring at the glow of his laptop. His inbox pinged. An email had arrived from a strange address, no subject line. The body contained only one sentence. If you are still a father, look closer. The words hit like a match in dry tinder. He sat back, pulse hammering. Someone else saw it, too. He wasn't imagining it. 2 nights later, the storm arrived. Rain lashed against the tall glass windows. Wind rattled the steel frames, and at 2 a.m., the power cut out, plunging the house into sudden black. Milo's cry sliced through the dark high and panicked. Theo bolted upright, grabbed the whistle from his nightstand, the one his mother had given him as a joke for emergencies only, and blew. The sound shrieked through the halls, a thin, metallic scream. From downstairs came the slam of a door. Riley Shaw, the building superintendent, stormed in with a flashlight beam slicing the dark. Theo, kid. He reached the nursery, found Theo rocking Milo in the crib, the baby's face blotched red. Monitor went dead. Theo gasped. She locked the formula again. He can't breathe right. Riley didn't waste time. He pulled open the bathroom cabinet with a multi-tool, found the stash of formula inside, and shoved a canister into Theo's hands. Mix it now. I'll deal with the lock later. By the time Celeste appeared in the hallway, robe cinched tight, her face a mask of sleepy innocence, Theo was already tipping the bottle into Milo's mouth. The baby latched desperately, his cries weakening into gulps. What's going on here? Celeste demanded, eyes sharp. Power cut, Riley said flatly, shining the light into her face. Funny coincidence, huh? Celeste's smile flickered. Accidents happen. Riley didn't move. Neither did Theo. For the first time, Celeste looked unsettled. The following day, Marcus canceled a meeting and called Dev Patel, the family attorney, who had once been Unji's closest friend. She's setting up a guardianship evaluation, Dev said, after hearing the details. Boarding school asset transfers, it's a pattern. We need evidence. I have it, Marcus said, his voice low. Theo's been documenting. And I'm ready to see. He ended the call, leaned back, and closed his eyes. The image of Theo, clutching Milo on the back steps, replayed in his mind over and over. That night after Celeste had gone out for another spa appointment, Marcus found the toy whale on Theo's shelf. He picked it up, turned it over, and saw the faint red blink of the hidden camera. He pressed play. The footage was grainy, but clear. Celeste snatching a bottle from Milo's mouth, slapping Theo's hand when he reached to protect his brother, whispering threats sharp enough to cut. Marcus's breath came slow, heavy, his jaw tightening with each frame. At last he closed the video set the whale back and whispered into the dark, I see it now. The storm passed, but inside the park house tension only deepened. Celeste grew bolder, talking openly about discipline and structure. She brought home glossy brochures for exclusive boarding schools in Connecticut, left them spread across the kitchen island. This is what Theo needs, she told Marcus over dinner, her tone honeyed. Rules, boundaries, professional guidance. You work too much, you can't do it all. Marcus lifted his glass, swirling the wine, but said nothing. Theo sat across from him, pushing peas around his plate, Milo asleep in the stroller beside him. When Theo glanced up, their eyes met. For the first time in months, Marcus didn't look away. Days blurred into a rhythm of small cruelties. Celeste rationed formula by teaspoons, locking cabinets when she left. Theo scavenged extra sandwiches at school, hiding them in his backpack for Milo. Patricia continued slipping him bread rolls, each one a silent act of rebellion. Ms. Hahn documented bruises, missed meals, fainting spells in her teacher's log. Riley logged every time the alarms mysteriously cut out when Celeste was home alone with the children. Each fragment, small on its own, began to form a pattern too sharp to ignore. And in Marcus's study, the folder labeled Evidence grew. One evening, as thunder cracked over the bay and the Golden Gate flickered like a ghost in the distance, Marcus closed the folder and stood at the window. His reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, stiff-shouldered, a man who had built a billion-dollar company but had failed to feed his son. Yunji's words echoed again. Theo sees more than he says. Don't let the light go out. Marcus pressed his palm against the glass fog, dampening the city lights below. Behind him from the nursery, Milo whimpered, and Theo's small voice rose in comfort. That sound, that blend of despair and determination, was the spark that finally pushed him across the line. Tomorrow, he promised himself. Tomorrow he would stop watching and start acting. By the end of that week, the fog had lifted, but inside the park residence the air was tighter than ever, charged, restless, like the pause before an earthquake. Theo felt it in the way Celeste moved through the house, her heels sharper, her smile thinner, her eyes always darting to the clock. She had stopped pretending to be gentle when Marcus was out. Her voice had grown colder, her punishments quicker. Every hour now seemed to carry a countdown he couldn't see. The first sign came in the form of a leather folder left casually on the kitchen counter one morning. Theo wasn't meant to notice it, but Celeste had placed it there deliberately, like bait. He stood on tiptoe to glance at the embossed letters Coleman and Associates Family Law. That night during dinner, she made her move. Marcus had barely touched his plate. His mind still at the lab, when Celeste slid a glossy brochure across the table. "Look at this," she said brightly, her tone pitched for persuasion. "St. Vincent's Academy in Connecticut, one of the finest prep schools in the country. They specialize in behavioral discipline. Theo would thrive there." Theo's fork froze in midair. He didn't lift his eyes. His chest felt like it had been carved hollow. Boarding school. She wanted him gone. Marcus sipped his wine, masking the tremor in his hand. "Boarding school, he's 10. Celeste's smile widened. "Which is why it's the perfect age. They shape boys into men. Think of it as an investment like your lab trials. Early intervention equals better outcomes." Her eyes glinted as she placed a second folder on the table. This one thicker, heavier, the kind lawyers carried into court. "Richard Coleman will handle the guardianship evaluation. He's the best. It's only paperwork, Marcus. Streamlining things for the children's future." Theo glanced quickly at his father. For the first time, Marcus didn't look away. He saw the faint line of panic in Theo's eyes. He saw the silent plea, and something inside him hardened. "I'll review it," Marcus said coolly. "No rush." Celeste blinked just once before sliding the folder back into her bag. But Theo caught the flash of irritation beneath her painted calm. The next morning, Marcus called Dev Patel, Yunji's old friend. They met in Dev's office, a place lined with oak shelves and the faint scent of old law books. "She's moving fast," Marcus said, pushing the Coleman folder across the desk. "Guardianship property transfer boarding school. She wants control of the accounts." Dev flipped through the pages, his sharp eyes narrowing. "These aren't suggestions. These are draft orders. If you'd signed, she'd have had temporary custody rights and co-control of your estate." He looked up. Marcus, this is fraud dressed as family planning. Marcus's jaw clenched. What do I do? You stop signing. You freeze every secondary account she has access to. And you document everything, every bruise, every bottle of watered milk. We build a case. Quietly. Because if she knows you're onto her, she'll accelerate. Marcus nodded, his throat dry. For the first time in months, he felt less like a man drifting in fog, and more like one holding a compass. Back at the house, Theo sensed the shift. His father came home earlier than usual, eyes sharper, questions more precise. Marcus lingered longer in the nursery, watching Milo feed, watching Theo sketch on his iPad in silence. He no longer dismissed Patricia's blunt warnings or Ms. Hahn's notes. But Celeste noticed too. She began to tighten her grip. That week, Milo's pediatric appointment, already rescheduled twice, was canceled again. The doctor can wait, Celeste said airily. He's fine. Babies cry. It builds lung strength. Theo clenched his fists so tightly the nails bit into his palms. He wanted to shout, but the words caught. Celeste's threat echoed in his mind. If you tell, the baby goes without. Instead, he slipped another entry into his red notebook. Doctor canceled again. He wheezed last night. She said it's normal. 2 days later, during a rain-slick evening, Theo sat at the dining table with Milo in his lap, trying to spoon-feed him mashed carrots. Celeste leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone, her nails tapping like tiny knives. When Milo spat up, weak and cranky, Theo hurried to wipe his chin. The spoon clattered to the floor. Celeste's head snapped up. In 3 strides, she was across the room, her hand striking Theo's shoulder, hard enough to knock him sideways. Clumsy boy, she hissed. You'll never learn. Theo bit down on the pain, cradling Milo tighter. He whispered, I'll do better. Unbeknownst to Celeste, the whale camera perched on the bookshelf blinked quietly, recording everything. That weekend, Celeste upped her game. She hosted a private dinner, inviting Richard Coleman, her attorney, and a man named Anthony Blake, a financial consultant with slicked-back hair and a too-bright smile. Theo watched from the staircase as the adults laughed over wine and seared salmon. Celeste's voice carried easily. Marcus has too much on his plate, she purred. This way Richard can simplify the estate structure. Anthony will manage the accounts. Everything efficient, safe, tidy. Richard smiled thinly. Temporary transfers. Just signatures. Once the children are in school, it will all be seamless. Theo's stomach dropped. He crept back upstairs, his chest tight. She's not just sending me away. She's taking everything. Later that night, when the guests had left and Celeste was upstairs removing her makeup, Marcus walked quietly into Theo's room. The boy looked up from his notebook, startled. Show me, Marcus said softly. Theo hesitated, then slid the notebook across the desk. Marcus opened it, flipping through page after page, bruises, hunger threats, diluted bottles. His hands trembled, but he kept reading every shaky line, carving deeper into his chest. At last he closed the notebook and placed it carefully on the desk. He knelt so his eyes met Theo's. I believe you, Marcus said. His voice was low, steady, but it shook with something raw. I should have believed you sooner. I won't look away again. Theo's lips parted, but no words came. His eyes burned. For the first time, his father's gaze didn't slide past him. It held. From that night on, the house became a battleground of shadows. Celeste tightened control, locking food cabinets, whispering sharper threats. But Marcus countered quietly. He called Riley to install new locks on the office, rerouted financial alerts to his private email, met with Dev at dawn in coffee shops no one tracked. Every night, Marcus sat in his study, replaying whale camera footage, building a folder of evidence. Every morning, Celeste laid out another brochure, another legal draft pushing him to sign. The storm lines were drawn. One evening, after a tense dinner where Celeste spoke at length about St. Vincent's Academy, its prestige, its alumni, its discipline, Marcus set down his fork. "Who introduced you to Coleman?" he asked casually. Celeste's smile faltered just a breath. "A friend. Laura. You don't know her?" Marcus nodded slowly, filing the name away. He had learned to ask short questions, not to argue, not yet. The cameras and the notebooks would speak louder than any denial. Across the table, Theo met his father's gaze again. His eyes, weary but determined, glimmered with the faintest spark of hope. That night, as thunder rolled over the city, Theo lay awake, Milo breathing softly beside him. The boy stared at the ceiling, clutching the whistle in his fist. He didn't know when it would happen, but he knew it was coming. Celeste was moving faster, cornering them. The walls of the house felt tighter, the air heavier, the countdown louder. But he also knew something had shifted. His father wasn't blind anymore. For the first time, Theo allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the truth would break through before it was too late. The night of the gala arrived like a storm wrapped in velvet. The Legion of Honor rose above Lincoln Park, its marble columns gleaming under a misting rain, the Pacific winds rattling through eucalyptus trees nearby. Luxury cars lined the drive, headlights piercing fog valets jogging in black jackets. Inside, chandeliers spilled golden light over gowns and tuxedos, champagne flutes glittered, and the hum of polite laughter filled the air. For everyone else, it was a fundraiser for children's cancer research. For Marcus Park, it was the battlefield. Theo clung to Marcus's side as they entered his small frame, stiff in a navy suit, his hair combed neatly, though his eyes betrayed the exhaustion of too many sleepless nights. Milo stayed home with Patricia, wrapped in safe arms for once. Celeste floated ahead, radiant in a silver gown that caught every shard of light, her smile, a polished weapon. She was in her element, elbows brushing with socialites' cheek kisses, with donors the perfect wife on display. But Marcus's hand stayed steady on Theo's shoulder, his jaw set like stone. Tonight was not her performance alone. In a private lounge off the main hall, Celeste laid the final trap. Richard Coleman, her attorney, waited with a slim black briefcase. Anthony Blake, the accountant, stood beside him, already flipping through spreadsheets as though the estate were his. Celeste ushered Marcus in, her tone warm, coaxing. "Darling, this is only paperwork. Everyone simplifies things when they reach this level. Richard's the best. Anthony will take care of the accounts, and then you won't have to worry. Sign tonight, and we can finally breathe." Richard slid the folder forward pages marked with sticky notes. Sign here, initial there. Theo stood near the doorway, silent, but his heart slammed so hard he thought the marble walls could hear it. He saw the inked lines, the signatures waiting to erase him and Milo from their father's protection. Marcus's hand hovered over the pen, his face unreadable. Celeste leaned close, her perfume a wave of jasmine and ice. "Please, Marcus, don't let grief cloud your judgment. Do this for the children." "For the children." The words curdled in Theo's gut. Marcus looked up. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "I'll review it after dinner." Celeste blinked, caught off guard. She had expected quick compliance, not delay. Richard cleared his throat smoothly, trying to fill the silence. "Mr. Park, efficiency is best. The language is standard, just signatures." But Marcus only closed the folder, slid it back across the table and stood. After dinner, he repeated. His eyes flickered toward Theo. For a split second, the boy saw it, a signal. a promise. Dinner was a performance. Waiters glided with trays of caviar and wine, the orchestra played softly, and Celeste sparkled like the star of the room. She laughed in all the right places, leaned in close to donors, whispered about her children with feigned maternal warmth. Theo sat between Marcus and Ms. Hahn, who had been invited as a school representative. She glanced at Theo's thin frame, then at Marcus's taut jaw, and said nothing but her presence was anchor enough. Celeste seized her moment during dessert. Rising gracefully, she clinked her glass, capturing the room's attention. Friends, family, she began, her voice sweet as sugar tonight. We celebrate generosity. And soon, Marcus and I will be making changes to secure our children's future education estate, everything aligned. The words hung heavy. Marcus pushed back his chair slowly. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small black remote. Actually, he said, his voice carrying with an edge no one had heard before, let's show everyone what kind of future we're talking about. He pressed the button. The chandeliers dimmed. The donor wall behind the dais flickered alive. At first, guests leaned forward in curiosity, champagne glasses hovering. Then the images came grainy, raw, undeniable. Celeste in the kitchen slapping Theo's shoulder for dropping a spoon. Celeste yanking a bottle from Milo's lips, tipping it into the sink as the baby wailed. Celeste hissing in Theo's ear, "If you tell he goes without." Gasps rippled across the hall. Someone's fork clattered to the table. A woman covered her mouth. Theo's heart slammed, but he couldn't look away. For once, everyone could see. It wasn't just his notebook, wasn't just whispers in the dark. The truth was lit up 20 feet high on marble walls. Celeste shot to her feet, her face drained of color. "This is doctored!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Marcus, how dare you? These are lies, manipulations!" Marcus cut her off, his voice a blade. "No more lies." He gestured toward the screen where another clip played, Celeste counting cash, pulled from an envelope marked Children's Formula, then texting Laura Mitchell about spa packages. Murmurs rose like a tide anger building in the room. Celeste lunged for the remote, but Marcus held it high, unflinching. At that moment, the doors swung open. Detective Aria Mendoza strode in, flanked by 2 officers. Her presence was calm, but commanding, her badge catching the chandelier light. She held up a warrant. "Celeste Vance, Richard Coleman, Anthony Blake, step aside. We have orders to seize financial records and video evidence." The room erupted. Richard sputtered. "This is a civil matter. You can't." Mendoza's eyes cut sharp. "We have probable cause for fraud and child endangerment. Mr. Coleman, sit down before you add obstruction." Anthony tried to slip towards the side exit, but one officer intercepted him, yanking the briefcase from his hand. Inside were wire transfers, guardianship drafts, and accounts linking spa payments to embezzled funds. The evidence was complete. Celeste thrashed as the officers approached, her silver gown shimmering under the harsh grip of handcuffs. She spun toward Theo, eyes wild, voice venom. "You ruined everything, you worthless boy." Theo flinched, but before he could lower his gaze, Marcus stepped in front of him, towering, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't you dare touch him. Don't even look at him." For the first time, Marcus's stance was not just defensive, but absolute. A wall. A father. Celeste spat curses as she was led out, Richard pale and trembling, Anthony shouting about misunderstandings. Guests whispered, recorded on their phones, their shocked faces, a mirror of the rot that had just been dragged into light. When the room finally quieted, Marcus turned to the screen where the last clip still played, Theo kneeling on the back steps, breaking bread in half for Milo. His small voice whispering, "Don't cry, I've got you." The silence was heavier than thunder. Marcus turned, scanning the room, his voice steady. "This is what was happening inside my house," while I looked away. He drew a breath, eyes flickering to Theo. No more. Later that night, after statements were taken after the officers had left with boxes of evidence, and the gala had disbanded into stunned whispers, Marcus led Theo out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, but the street still shimmered under the glow of street lamps. They stood beside the car in silence. Theo clutched his whistle, his fingers trembling. "Dad," he whispered, his voice raw, Are you going to leave us again?" Marcus knelt, meeting his son's eyes. No distractions, no evasions, no cold mask, just truth. "No," he said softly. "Not again. Not ever. I see you now, Theo. I see everything, and I'm not looking away." Theo's chest hitched, his small shoulders shook, and for the first time in months he allowed himself to cry, loud, open, unhidden. Marcus pulled him close, holding him tightly against his chest, letting the boy's sobs soak into his jacket. Above them, the city's fog drifted thin, revealing a scatter of stars. Inside the car, waiting with Patricia, who had come to watch Milo, the baby stirred, then settled back into sleep. Safe. For the first time in a long time, safe. The following morning, the park residence felt like a different house. No shouting heels, no perfume masking the scent of sour milk, no locked cabinets rattling in the dark. The silence was still heavy, but it was a new kind of heavy, like the air right after a storm, when the clouds haven't quite parted, but the rain has stopped falling. Theo woke first. For the first time in months, he hadn't slept with his shoes on. He sat up slowly, blinking at the soft light streaming through the curtains. Across the room, Milo stirred in his crib, his breathing steady, his cheeks rounder already after Patricia's late-night soup. Theo padded to the crib, placed his palm gently against his brother's chest, and whispered, "It's different now. We're okay." Downstairs, Marcus stood in the kitchen staring at a half-boiled kettle. He wore sweats instead of a suit, his hair mussed his face, marked by sleeplessness. But there was something new in his stance, something rooted. He reached for the formula canister Patricia had brought, measured the scoops carefully poured. Warm water shook the bottle. His hand shook once, but he steadied it. When Milo's cry echoed from upstairs, Marcus didn't flinch or call for someone else. He climbed the stairs, bottle in hand, and fed his son himself. Theo stood at the doorway, silent, watching. Marcus glanced up, eyes tired but present. "2 scoops," he said softly, almost like asking permission. Theo nodded. For the first time, he allowed a small smile. The days that followed were slow, stitched together with ordinary tasks that felt extraordinary simply because they were finally safe. At night, when Milo cried, Marcus got up, sometimes clumsily, sometimes burning his hand on water too hot, but always present. Theo still hovered, watching protectively, but he no longer clenched his fists. He began to trust the rhythm of his father's hands rocking the crib, the low hum Marcus would murmur to calm the baby. On the 3rd night, Milo spiked a fever. Panic clawed through the house, but this time Marcus didn't freeze or look away. He wrapped the baby in a blanket, barked at Theo. "Get my coat," and drove through rain-slick streets to the hospital. Theo clung to his side in the waiting room, while Marcus held Milo tight against his chest, whispering, "Stay with me, don't leave me." When the pediatrician explained it was a viral fever and would pass, Marcus nearly collapsed with relief. Theo watched his father's hands tremble as he signed the forms, and for the first time he didn't feel alone in fear. He felt something else, shared weight. Community began to fill the cracks Celeste had left behind. Patricia knocked daily with hot soup bread rolls, or sometimes just a steady hand on Theo's shoulder. "Eat, boy," she said gruffly. "Your brother needs you strong." Ms. Hahn visited after school bringing cartons of milk and storybooks. She sat with Theo at the kitchen table, asking about homework, guiding his small fingers across multiplication problems, pausing only to smile at Milo's coos. Riley, the superintendent, came by to fix locks and replace old monitors. "No more blackouts," he said firmly, setting up a secure system Marcus could check from his phone. Bit by bit, the house transformed from a cage into a home. One evening, Marcus walked past Theo's room and noticed him bent over a red notebook. The boy's hand no longer shook as he wrote. Curious, Marcus stepped closer. On the page were simple lines carefully written. "Today, Dad carried Milo. Dad made milk himself. Dad stayed home all evening." Marcus's chest tightened. He reached for Olivia's framed photo on Theo's desk, her smile frozen in time, eyes gentle. He whispered, barely audible, "I kept my promise." "Late, but I kept it." Theo looked up, catching him. For a moment, father and son simply stared. Then Marcus placed a hand on Theo's hair, rough but steady. "I'm sorry," he said. Words he had never spoken before. "I should have been here sooner." Theo blinked, then nodded slowly. "You're here now." By the following month, the park's story had spread quietly across the neighborhood. Not in tabloid headlines, Marcus had shut those down swiftly, but in whispers of kindness. People knew Celeste was gone. Knew Marcus had chosen to stay with his children instead of hiding behind his work. And they wanted to help. It was Patricia who planted the seed. One evening she set down a casserole and said, "You've got money, Marcus. You could do more than feed just your own. There are others. Children like yours? Start something." Marcus stayed up that night at the kitchen table, Milo asleep in his crib nearby Theo, sketching softly at his side. On the laptop screen, a blank document waited. Marcus typed slowly, carefully, "Hope Haven Center Founding Plan." The words looked fragile at first. Then they rooted line by line. A kitchen where no child went hungry. A counseling room for children who couldn't yet speak their fears. A learning corner with books and crayons. Not a polished press release, not a publicity stunt, just a blueprint for safety. When the center opened months later, it was small. A renovated ground floor space near Fillmore Street walls, still smelling faintly of paint. But it pulsed with warmth. Maggie Lewis, who owned the diner on the corner, brought trays of cookies and coffee. Patricia set up the reading nook with children's books from her attic. Ms. Hahn offered to run afternoon classes. Riley installed cameras, sturdy locks, and a fire alarm system that actually worked. On the first day, Theo stood at the blank wall with a brush in his hand. Marcus knelt beside him. "What do you want to draw?" Theo thought for a long time, then painted slowly, carefully 3 figures holding hands under a sun, with the words in shaky letters above them. "Family is where no one is left behind." Aaron Morales, a former social worker who volunteered to coordinate, looked at the mural and said simply, "That's the soul of this place." Milo toddled nearby, chubby legs, wobbly laughter bubbling. When he fell, Marcus was there in 2 strides, lifting him up, holding him close. Theo clapped his smile wide. For once, the light in his eyes didn't flicker. Seasons turned. The trial came and went. Celeste convicted of child abuse and financial fraud, sentenced to years behind bars. Marcus refused the press circus. Instead, he stayed home rockin' Milo, reading Theo's notebook entries, building Hope Haven brick by brick with volunteers. At Christmas, the center glowed with strings of lights. Children hung paper stars on the tree. Maggie handed out cocoa, Patricia read stories, Miss Hahn guided carols. Theo wore a red coat, clutching Marcus's arm. "Dad, can I hang this?" he asked, holding up a small sign he had written. Marcus bent down. The words were simple. "Family is where no one is left behind." He nodded. "Put it at the top." Theo stretched, balancing on tiptoe. As he pinned the sign high, Milo waddled unsteadily across the floor, his first true steps. Laughter erupted, warm and real. Marcus caught his son just as he fell, lifting him high into the air. And then, as though the night itself had been waiting, Milo looked at his father, his mouth opening, his small voice clear. "Dad." The word hit Marcus like sunlight breaking storm clouds. His throat tightened, his arms trembled, but his hold never faltered. He pressed his son close, whispering, "I hear you. I'm here." Theo leaned against his father's side, listening to the rhythm of a heartbeat, steady and warm. Later, when the last child had left, when the cocoa cups had been cleared, and the lights dimmed, Marcus stood in the courtyard of Hope Haven. Snowflakes drifted faintly through the San Francisco night, a rarity fragile fleeting. He tilted his face upward, then lowered his gaze to his children asleep inside. "We lost too much," he murmured. "But from now on, there will be only light." He touched Olivia's photograph, tucked in his wallet, whispering, "I kept the promise." Inside, Theo stirred Milo's small breaths steady. The mural glowed faintly in the dark words painted in a child's hand standing eternal on the wall. Family is where no one is left behind. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting monsters in the dark. It's recognizing when the monster lives behind a smile inside your own house. For months, Theo carried a weight no child should carry, hunger. He couldn't fix a baby brother. He had to shield silence that felt like a prison. His small voice whispered into notebooks and cameras when no one else would listen. He learned to endure, but endurance alone doesn't save a childhood. What saves it is when someone finally decides to see. That's the heart of this story. Marcus wasn't a bad man. He was grieving, blinded, lost in work and money. But grief became an excuse, and excuses became absence. And absence can wound as much as cruelty. The night he finally looked, really looked at Theo, kneeling with bread in his hand and a baby in his arms, the whole story shifted. That moment of sight was the spark. The truth is, we don't always need heroes in capes. Sometimes we just need one person willing to stop pretending to speak the word, stop out loud, to pull evidence out of shadows, to say, "I see you. I believe you. I will not turn away again." Theo's story reminds us that silence is dangerous, but silence can also be broken. A teacher who notices bruises, a neighbor who hears hunger, a father who finally chooses to stay. Each thread alone might seem fragile, but together they weave a net strong enough to catch a falling child. And what about us? How many Theos live in our neighborhoods, quiet children carrying secrets heavier than their backpacks? How many Milos cry in the dark, their voices dismissed as just fussing? How many Marcus figures bury themselves in work, while danger grows right behind their polished doors? The lesson is simple, but urgent. Don't look away. Ask the question. Notice the silence. Believe the child. Because one timely act of seeing can be the difference between a life that crumbles and a life rebuilt with light. Hope Haven wasn't just a building Marcus founded. It was an answer to Olivia's last words, to Theo's notebooks, to Milo's cries. A place where hunger is met with warm bread, where silence is met with listening, where no one is left behind. And maybe that's the deeper invitation for all of us, to build our own hope havens, not always with walls and signs, but in the way we treat the children around us, the neighbors next door, the voices we too often dismiss. So I want to leave you with 3 questions. If you were Marcus, would you have had the courage to look when it hurt the most? If you were Theo, how would you have found a way to signal for help? And in your own life, where are the silences you've been pretending not to hear? Your perspective matters. Every comment you share might be a lifeline for someone who is reading quietly, waiting for a sign that they are not alone. Thank you for walking through this story with me. If it touched you, please subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. Because you never know, your single act of sharing could be the light another child has been waiting for. The truth is, simple light sometimes comes late, but it always comes.